Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a lot of food for discussion. And of course, it's always a problem, frankly speaking, having international documents which leave certain actions and ways of dealing with it to the member states. Yeah, I must say so, you know, because then we find immediately a lot of differences and different approaches. But we are going to discuss this afterwards. Then, of course, you spoke about the victims, you know, and I remember earlier discussions, you know, we said, well, these people very often or most of the time get some money for it. Are they victims? Yeah, are they victims? So all this has to be considered, and how to deal with it, and what to do, and many more. You know, the relations, you know, sometimes in some countries, of course you can donate an organ to family members, or, you know, and in some countries they open it up to friends, you know, so for money you find quickly a friend maybe, you know, to whom you can give this organ, etc. So all these sort of things are certainly important to discuss, and I hope we will, you know, we will today, because we really have the experts here, and we might not solve everything, but nevertheless, they are the experts and know how to deal with it. And as I said before, we also have UNODC with the training modules, you know. We would also discuss whether this is helpful or not, because general awareness is one thing. This is also important. But then we have to go deeper into the matter and to find out who has to do what, you know, because, I mean, maybe it's gossiping, but we all know of rich actors, actresses, you know, just buying organs, you know, going somewhere and doing that. I mean, I could name a few, you know, but nobody does anything against that. So all this is part, then afterwards, of our discussion. I would now like just go to Vera Gracheva and Istvàn Szilard, asking to be short for the moment. We discuss it later on again, on concrete cases. Just tell us something, because it should not be too theoretical what we do here, you know, because we speak about, well, organ transplantation and so on. We miss, you know, what it really is, you know, what harm it causes sometimes to people, or in most cases to people, etc., etc. So I would like to start with Vera Gracheva on you choose one, or let's say two concrete cases you know from your large perspective of everything you know on this. Vera,
shall I speak from
as you like. Or you take the micro, or you come here.
Okay, I will take the micro. Thank you very much, dear Helga, and congratulations on this fantastic high-level expert event. It's a huge contribution to the anti-trafficking course. I will start with by saying that very often we underestimate the impact of what we are doing while providing the wide community with our reports, research, contributions, speeches, and so on and so forth. Soon after the launch of the report of the OSCE, which is available outside, the office, I was privileged to work for the office for 10 years. The office was bombarded with telephone calls, emails by lawyers who represented their client, and this client was the rector of International University in Baku, linked to the criminal case which is quoted in the report. It's a case when traffickers recruited donors from Ukraine, from Russia, from Belarus, from Uzbekistan, and conducted illegal transplantations in Baku and in Kiev, and also in Ecuador and in Kosovo. So this person was the head of the university, in the framework of which there was a clinic or transplantation center, which had no license for such operations. Still, the director of this clinic got the permission from rector to conduct these illegal operations. There was no documentation, no registration of cases, nothing left, just $130,000 financial gain. And this person, when the case was opened, criminal case, he fled from Azerbaijan and he got a refugee status in France. When the report appeared, the media started to quote the report, and his name appeared in the media. His name. Yes, because the OSCE report contains no names. No names at all. We were very cautious at that time. And he felt completely offended, and he started to say that the OSCE undermined his reputation, and he asked for apologies or some official papers that will prove his innocence. Finally, the lawyers appeared at the OSCE. The person himself came to the OSCE, and our role as advisors of the office was to protect the special representative from his visitors. And we agreed to send a letter on a very low level, signed by an advisor, stating quite pure and simple things. That first of all, the OSCE provided no names of the offenders, and his name was not there. And secondly, we quoted the disclaimer from all our publications that nothing in this publication can be viewed as the official position of the OSCE. Full stop. We closed the discussion. But really it matters what we say, how we deal with cases, how accurate we are, and how precise we are in our wording, so to say. When I started to collect cases for this particular event, I had to encompass the same obstacles as the office when the office was preparing the report, because the information can be divided into two categories, let's say. One part completely denying the phenomenon and saying that it's myths and that no such crime exists in the world. And the second part stating horrifying stories and allegations and rumors and so on and so forth. What's worse, that some of these stories are strongly politicized, especially if the allegations are related to the places where we have conflicts or the refugee crisis or something like that, which is very sensitive. And there appears the question of reliability of the sources and of the information we get. So the actual amount of cases which can be quoted or referred to is very limited, very limited. In the Russian Federation, for example, I can for sure speak about a case when quite long ago in 2000, a grandmother tried to sell her grandchild, a boy, 5 years old, for the removal of organs. She was very poor, extremely poor, and she saw a TV documentary showing the high profitability of trafficking in organs, of trafficking human beings for the removal of organs. So she decided to gain some money for her family by giving this child to someone. And she posted an advertisement on the internet that she would like to sell a boy. Of course, it became known to the law enforcement, and law enforcement officials pretended that they are potential buyers. And they met with this woman, and they gave her the money, and she gave them the boy with all the medical documentation, certificate of birth, all the data. Of course, she was arrested, and there was a trial, but she got not that much. She got 4.5 years of imprisonment. And her relatives, her son and his wife, who accompanied her to provide a kind of security for this meeting, they were sentenced, how is it called? They got suspended sentences of 2 and 3 years as accomplices. That's it. No, no, relatives. Because the mother of this boy just disappeared from the screen. She gave her child to her mother and disappeared. Nobody needed this boy, let's say. No, because he was rescued by the law enforcement, and he was the boy. And he was accommodated in some child care institutions, so the boy was safe. But the effect of this case, of course, was devastating. Another case from the Russian Federation took place in 2003, and it was an allegation of an attempt for an illegal removal of organs at a transplantation center in Moscow, but it was impossible to prove anything. So the matter was that the surgeons who started to prepare a person for the operation didn't have the confirmation of his death. And that was the reason for the prosecution to start the case. But it was just a documentary mistake, so to say, and the surgeons didn't get any bad follow-up for the case. But it frightened the Transplantologist Society a lot, and it gave rise to transplantation tourism. I must say that there are, of course, lots of legal problems in this area, and it is either the deficiencies in the laws on trafficking in human beings, or in the laws which regulate transplantology, or both, and this has to be developed further, and of course in accordance with international instruments, and the Council of Europe Convention is very helpful in this sense. In Russia, we expect the adoption of a new law on transplantology, which will confirm the presumption of consent, which will permit child donations, which will, of course, prohibit or confirm the prohibition of transplantations for gain, for financial and other gain, which will also establish a position of a national coordinator in this area, which could be some kind of focal point. And this is quite important because coordination in this area is, you know how important it is. There are also gaps in the legislation when, for example, some strong provisions in the anti-trafficking legislation or in transplantology legislation are not supported by the criminal codes. And this discrepancy also makes life quite difficult for the judges, for the prosecutors, how to combine all these things together. I think that I exhausted my limit.
Thank you very much, Vera. I think, please, yeah.
Dear Helga, may I add just one phrase? Please. That while working on the addendum to the OSCE action plan, the participating states elaborated quite a number of important recommendations on trafficking in human beings for the removal of organs and how to deal with it. And the addendum, as far as I know, will be available outside for everybody who is interested. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vera. We move on to Istvàn Szilard. Also, he has also the tendency to be quite eloquent, so please. We run a bit out of time, yeah, therefore, but we take it on again, you know, in the afternoon, because anyway, we would like, after lunch, we continue to discuss it. So please, you have the floor on your experience, especially in Kosovo. I know you have a lot of experiences in this, but especially this. Please, Istvàn.
Thank you, Helga, so much. First of all, thank you for inviting me for this so important roundtable, and just to speak something about my experiences in the past. Currently, I am heading the Migration Health Department of University of Pécs Medical School. It is a unique department because most of the universities in Europe do not have a special department for migration health. And when I'm going back about 20 years in the past, and let me also then to make some notes or better suspicions from the process of today, I would like just to recall my memories when I was heading the International Organization for Migration Health Relief Operations in Bosnia and in Kosovo. That was in the very bloody time of the civil war in former Yugoslavia. And just following the Dayton Peace Agreement, we started the reconstruction, rehabilitation of the health system and also assisting the victims there. During that period, we were acting also in cooperation with the so-called international police forces. And they have launched some counter-trafficking operations as well. You know that, I may say unfortunately even today, but that time the route of trafficking in human beings was crossing Kosovo, Bosnia, Albania towards Italy. And during these operations, where personally I was also participating, because when we tried to release and rehabilitate the victims, naturally it has a serious medical impact as well, so that's why my health expertise was needed. During that period, 2 times, when we were speaking about the dirtiest and the most shadow part of trafficking of human being, then it is trafficking in children for organ transplantation. So in 2 attacks, altogether 10 children have been released. And during the interrogation, it became clear that unfortunately they were sold by the parents. So when we are speaking about not the medical aspect, but the legal, the juridical aspect, what to do? Luckily, now they have been released, but shall we send them back to those parents who were sold them? It was not an easy issue to find those legal procedures, how to provide guardianship for them, but anyway, so that here in Europe, it was a, how can I say, ongoing procedures. Not speaking about that the target where these poor kids were intended to traffic, it was western part of Europe. So that means that they had some cooperative health institutions for them. Let me not to name even the country, what became clear. And now, finally, because Olga is just looking at me very seriously, just some suspicions for the today. When Europe, even via the Balkan, is exposed to an unexpectedly high influx of migrants and refugees, this year, starting from January until now, only to Hungary, more than 200,000 migrants have crossed the borders, among them many unaccompanied minors. Most of them, it is the parents who were paying the smugglers just to manage the children, the kids, into the European Union because the current legislative support for minors is a very positive one, but it is a trip for months. And who knows that out of those children, during the trip, how many might have been kidnapped? There is no data about, but learning from my experience in the past, I may say that I'm just suspicious about. And later on, when to the WHO, I will have also some time to comment that will be focusing on the medical fields. And, many thanks for your attention and possibility.
As you said, you get a second chance also in the afternoon at the panel, yeah, but the others too. So I would like to move on to Silke Albert from the UNODC, having developed, tell us what you have developed and what experience you have with it. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Konrad, and again also for me, thanks for the invitation. I have actually been warned from the very beginning to be short, to not come with a prescripted speech, and to not just flag and highlight and promote how successful we are in our work. And since you know, Ms. Konrad knows how to speak with authority, I try to stick to that and dare not really to go against these instructions. However, when I'm invited to speak about our work explicitly, maybe then I just introduce my organization a little bit. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and my department focuses on the crime issues of things, and as that, my section focuses on anti-trafficking in persons and migrant smuggling. And our mandate is to implement what you heard already being mentioned. That's the Palermo Protocol. That's the protocol against trafficking in persons. It's an international treaty. It has been adopted by member states in the year 2000, and it has entered into force in 2003. And now already we have a close to universal level of ratification of that instrument, which in itself is a good sign. In about 10 years, it has this achievement. What is lacking, however, is its implementation. And also, we have this instrument, and like I said, it has been negotiated and adopted by member states, so it's not something that happened at the UN headquarters somewhere and then was presented to the public. So we have something that is an imperfect instrument, and it has a lot of things, just like the Council of Europe Convention. It has things that may be open to the member states, and it's open for their interpretation, and we have quite a number of those issues. Maybe I repeat and try to keep it simple. So trafficking in persons consists of three acts, and or three elements. One is the act of recruitment, transport, transfer, or harboring, etc. By certain means, by means of deception, the use or threat of force, an abuse of a position of vulnerability of a person for the purpose of exploitation. And the protocol says explicitly a purpose of exploitation is the removal of organs. And now there are a lot of terminology which is a bit difficult. What is a position of vulnerability of a person? What does exploitation mean? That's left undefined. and just to explain the importance of these means, the deception, the use of force, the abuse of a position of vulnerability, the protocol also explicitly says that the consent of a person to what is going to happen is irrelevant where any of these means have been used. And it's like in normal contracts as well. If you buy a car and you want to buy a diesel that is blue and you get a car that uses not diesel and is green, the contract is not valid. And it's a little bit similar in trafficking in persons. You can't consent to what you don't know the details of. People may be told, you are going to Europe and you earn a lot of money and you will be in a legal sector, blah, blah, blah. And then they come and arrive and they find themselves illegal, they find themselves in exploitative working conditions, which they couldn't consent to, which they have not consented to. So this is the thing. And so in trafficking in persons for the purpose of organ removal, we deal a little bit with the very same issues that we deal with other trafficking in persons cases. And one of the key issues is the issue of consent. There are legislations that don't even require the victim, the person the illegal means and the consent to be nullified. They just say, recruitment for the purpose of exploitation is trafficking. However, the consent comes up in most of the cases because the perpetrators would claim, but they agreed. They wanted it like that, and it's all voluntary. So this is when the consent comes up again. And it's similar in trafficking in persons for organ removal. And here, the issue of consent, I would say, is even is very strong because it's a consent to a medical intervention. And to this form of consent, you have specific requirements. This consent may have to be given in front of a body. The person must have been informed about the health consequences. In other words, there must be a fully informed consent. And that's very often what is lacking. What is lacking is the fully informed consent. Very often people would be told you have 2 kidneys, so one is just not needed at all. They would say, they would sign documents in a language that they won't understand. They have not had the counseling before, etc., etc. They are not aware of the aftercare needs. They are not aware of the risks itself of the operation, etc. So what can be assumed is that very often the fully informed consent is lacking. Now, the problem is how to prove it and where to start from. And so we organized 2 expert group meetings. Unfortunately, we could not develop training material, but we started with the development of an assessment handbook, because that's what was agreed by the first expert group meeting that brought together not only our usual suspects. So our usual suspects would be criminal justice practitioners and academia, NGOs that specialize in trafficking in persons, but also players from the health sector. And the discussions went from left to right and up and down. But in the end, we managed to agree and said what we need at that stage, since we don't know exactly what is happening, is an assessment handbook. And maybe then at a second stage, based on the information that we got at the expert group meeting, training tools. And maybe I should also mention that at the expert group meeting there were a couple of usual suspects. So there was the OSCE, but there was also the Council of Europe, and Marta was especially strong in feeding us with information. And also having the Council of Europe in the discussions, because of course there were the issues of, like, do our instruments compete, and what about, is it better to be identified as a victim of trafficking in persons then being identified as somebody who is a donor in an illegal transaction, etc. And I think the point might be well made that ideally, the instruments complement each other so that the Council of Europe instrument, in fact, covers the gaps that are there. But I think, to be honest, what is lacking for both instruments probably is the implementation. So we know in theory there should be legislation, there should be victim protection, there should be access to assistance, etc. But that needs to be done. And again, so we come as a first obligation. There is like the identification of cases, and in our case, in trafficking in persons, the identification of victims. And that's a key issue, and that goes across every trafficking in persons case. And now, of course, victims do not come forward to say, I'm a victim of trafficking in persons. I know exactly the definition, and here I am. I'm a victim of trafficking. It doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen for various reasons, and we heard already there are great vulnerabilities attached, and I think also the OSCE has mentioned it in trafficking in persons for organ removal is more pronounced, actually, the issue of the vulnerability, it's extreme poverty, is normally not, unlike in other trafficking cases where you have like even highly educated people, where you have people that just hope for better chances elsewhere, but you have extreme poverty people, and it has also been mentioned, who they're only, like their commodity, that's their commodity to offer is the organ. I don't know who mentioned it in the discussions. And I think that's just it. So a way, of course, of encouraging victims to come forward would also be to exempt them from punishment, because in most of the countries, selling an organ or offering an organ for sales or financial transactions with organs are illegal. So the victims who actually would report, they would face prosecutions, they would face the risk of punishment, which in fact normally plays right into the hands of the traffickers, because that's exactly what they want. They want the attention of the prosecutorial efforts to be on the victims who are wrongdoers if they are exploited in labor because they are entering illegal labor markets, etc. They may be wrongdoers if they are exploited in prostitution because prostitution is illegal. And they are wrongdoers if their organ is taken because selling or offering organs for sale is illegal. So I think that's a point, and also the OSCE has a great handbook and great guidance on the non-punishment of victims. So I think that's one issue. I look at Ms. Konrad, you stop me when it's getting too long. Okay. Again, the health sector involvement has been mentioned big time, and I think one of the issues that has been pointed out is the duties of doctors to report. And probably, I don't know if that's in the Council of Europe Convention on Trafficking in Human Organs, there must be probably looked for a way how they can report without violating this principle or oath of confidentiality. And I don't think it's so difficult, because I've talked to doctors and they also said that there is the duty to report, for example, a special type of diseases. So they would report for the interest of the public health sector, but they may not have to report their patient that is the organ recipient. So I don't know, there must be ways, probably, I'm not an expert enough in the medical field to talk about that, but and one thing that is, and it's again the same with many other trafficking cases, is international cooperation and the need for international cooperation among actors. So not just the health sector with the criminal justice sector, etc., but you must imagine that you have cases where the donor or the victim is from one country, the recipient is from another country, the operation takes place in yet another country by a doctor that comes from another country. So there are a lot of obstacles built into the cases, and it's very important that we learn and that we are eager to cooperate internationally. And I see Ms. Konrad on the podium, so I come to an end. Thank you.
We could discuss it, and hopefully we discuss it afterwards. We take it on again, yeah? But nevertheless, I would like to give the floor to the last speaker. Sorry, this is not a comfortable moment, but nevertheless, yeah? I would prefer to hear you now, because after lunch it's even more difficult, you know? It's Frederike from the Nephrology and Transplantation Department, Erasmus, from Rotterdam. And she's the head or the chair of a project, of a EU-funded project, which is fine, but you did it, it's not just one project. So you have also a critical view on certain issues, and this is what I would like you to focus on, really, you know? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Konrad. And I will try to be the briefest presentation of today so that we can go for lunch. Just very briefly to explain to you the project that I have been coordinating. I've been coordinating this from the Erasmus Medical Center University Hospital. It addresses combating trafficking in human beings for the purpose of organ removal. We have 15 organizations involved. We're funded by the European Commission, DG Home Affairs, and the organizations that we work with are transplantation organizations, law enforcement, NGOs. We have the European Police Organization, the UNODC, we have the National Police Association from the Netherlands, so it's very multidisciplinary. And what we've been doing over the past 3 years is conducting scientific evidence-based research on this crime. First of all, we did a comprehensive literature review. We've interviewed patients who traveled abroad and purchased organs. Most likely, most of them were purchased on the black market. These patients paid doctors, brokers, and hospitals in return for a kidney transplant. In addition, we traveled to Kosovo, to Israel, and South Africa, where we interviewed more than 35 people about organ trafficking networks that were prosecuted in these countries. And we interviewed police, we interviewed prosecutors, we interviewed lawyers, investigators about their experiences, mainly their successes, but also the obstacles that they experienced in bringing these cases to court. I will not describe the results to you. You can find all of this information on the website of our project, which is mentioned on the program that you have with you. What I would like to share with you is just some of the take-home messages that we have discovered throughout this project. First of all is the need, and this has been touched upon already by my other panel members here, the importance that law enforcement and transplant professionals collaborate. There is an enormous gap between both fields, and one of our most important recommendations has indeed been to report organ trafficking networks, to have medical professionals report information to law enforcement. And this does not necessarily have to be the identity of a patient who purchased an organ, because this would need legal reform. It's a controversial topic. But I have sat with doctors in the Netherlands who've treated patients who've gone abroad, came back with a kidney of unknown origin, and there was a letter that the patient took back with the name of the hospital, the name of the transplant doctor, the name of the staff, the name of the city. There was information in that letter that doctors do not report to police, but that police could use in building a case without jeopardizing the patient. So this is what we are now trying to achieve. We're lobbying in the Netherlands at this moment as we speak. It's difficult to even establish this kind of reporting tool, but we're doing our best, and we are encouraging other countries to follow us. Another point that I want to share with you to take home is the importance to engage and involve experts that have hands-on experience with ethnographic research, investigating, prosecuting, convicting the crime, I have to say the UNODC has done an excellent job with this, with their 2 expert group meetings, because at these meetings we had people who could speak from the field. They could speak from their own experience in talking to kidney sellers, talking to kidney buyers. So this is one other important topic that I would like to highlight. Thirdly, I'm not sure if you are all in a position, but if you ever get the chance of obtaining funding for research or organizing a mission, please try and encourage ethnographic fieldwork research. Because the information that is out there, and Marta has already said this, it's very scattered. It's very much in its infancy. We're only just now starting to learn about how organ trafficking networks operate. The OSCE report is one of the best reports I have written about this crime, because they really describe the modus operandi in a very detailed manner. But it's only the tip of the iceberg that we are seeing here. There are much more cases probably out there that we still need to learn about. So if you can have the opportunity to do research on this topic, please do so. I can go on forever, but if I'll be here with lunch, so if you're interested to learn more about our work, please don't hesitate to find me. Thank you.